for the average person, what kind of strategy should they be adopting if you're not someone that has a huge amount of savings? Say you're working for one of these big companies. Are there any strategies that you should be thinking about now before the markets come down and there could be a recession?
I mean, rule number one is always be diversified.
What does that be diversified mean?
It means wholesome bonds, wholesome cash, perhaps a small amount of precious metals.
Like gold and silver?
Yeah.
And what is a bond? And how do I buy one?
Yeah, a bond is a loan that carries a fixed interest rate. Let's say today, 5%. You invest your money in it and it will pay you 5% as long as the credit worthiness of the other side is there. So if it's the U.S. government, you'll assume it's pretty credit worthy, and you buy a bond from the U.S. government. It's how the U.S. government funds a part of its activities. You can buy a 30-year U.S. government bond, a 10-year bond, a 2-year bond, a 90-day treasury bill, they call them, when they get that short. Everything goes fine. You receive this modest amount of money. You're 5% or you're 3%, depending on the conditions.
Okay, so a bond is basically lending the government money?
Yes.
And if you want to lend the government money...
lending a corporation money.
Okay, so you can also lend, like, Apple money?
Yes. What you're doing, actually, they have distributed it to the market, and you're acquiring it from one of the existing owners.
Oh, okay.
You're not actually giving them incremental money. They come to the market with $10 billion in a particular bond with a particular coupon. It says, we will pay you 3.5%. That's the coupon. And when you want to buy some of that bond, you go to your broker and he says, it's no longer selling at the original 100. It's now selling at 92 or 107, and you pay that and it transfers from one owner to you. There have been times in 1974 when you could get a bond that would pay 8, 9, 10%.
Per year?
Yes, per year.
So if I buy a US government 10-year treasury bond, essentially lending the US government money, I can do 4.46% a year, and Apple's current yield on a 10-year corporate bond is 4.7% a year, so almost 5% a year, which means if I put, $1,000 in, I'll make $475 over 10 years. Interesting. I never really knew how bonds work. So you're saying markets collapsing, diversify, get some money into bonds, keep some money in cash, and anything else in terms of diversified portfolio? Property?
Property is fine, except it's pretty darn expensive by historical standards. They've engineered a situation where house prices tend to rise. Great for the people who have a house and terrible for the people who would like to buy a house. Back in 94 in England, a typical house sold for 3.4 times your family income. That was about as low as it had been for 50 years. And then from 94 until today, it rose from 3.4 times to over 10 times, depending on where you live. And at 10 times income, a reasonable young couple are in big trouble. They can't really afford to buy a house. And that same high prices are reflected in rents. So they're really squeezed on living costs. And the same is true, even worse, in China, in Canada, Australia, most of Europe. House prices have simply been allowed to go up for the last 30. They didn't, traditionally, they traded flat or down 60, 70, 80 years until 1994 in the UK. But since then, house prices have risen everywhere.
So are you expecting house prices to come down sharply? I think I heard you say that they might come down 30%.
Even if they come down 30%, they're really still very expensive, aren't they? That would be, they'd come down to 6 or 7 times family income. They'd still be twice what they used to be in the good old days.
So I've got diversify, I've got reduce your position. There is probably going to be a bit of a job disruption as well.
And particularly if you have to own stocks, own them outside America. Don't own US stocks. That's a nice, simple strategy that you can act on.
Why?
They're much cheaper. And since the beginning of last year, they have handsomely outperformed the US.
Foreign stocks.
Foreign stocks of emerging countries, of European countries, Japan, Canada, Australia, and so on. You can find good broad indices, kind of the world ex-US, or emerging markets. And
invest outside of America.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll muddle through okay over the next 10 or 20 years. And I am not confident that the US will do that.
You're not confident in which part? That the US
I'm not confident that US equities will be intact in 5 years, 10 years.
So a US equity is a US stock?
Yes.
Why aren't you confident that they'll be intact in 5 or 10 years?
Because they're so badly overpriced today. Back in the tech bubble of 2000, we had a 10-year forecast for US equities of minus 2% a year for 10 years. And they came out with minus 3%. The period from 2000 to 2010, you simply lost money in the US market. 10 years later, you had less money than you started with. And this is a higher price market, I believe, than 2000.
So you think it's going to be even worse?
In Japan, you went 20 years and you lost money. You went 30 years and you still hadn't gotten back. It took 35 years for the Japanese market to recover.
So what are you saying?
What I'm saying is it's quite typical to get beaten around the head in the stock market when it becomes crazily overpriced, as it is today, and that it's a very good idea to take some responsibility and watch your tail.
But what advice do you give for the average person that's looking to invest their salary or their wages?
Buy a broad-based index of non-US equities.
Non-US? That's really surprising.
For like 60% of your money, and then 5 or 10% in precious metals. And if it's convenient and sensible, hold a bit of real estate. And the rest I'd put in bonds.
Okay, so 5 or 10% in things like silver and gold.
Yeah.
A preference for either silver or gold?
No.
S&P 500. No, you said non-US.
Non-US.
This is so interesting because everybody says invest in US stocks.
Of course they do. They've been completely dominant for 20 years, completely kicking ass around the rest of the world. And then in the last 12 months, emerging markets is up 65% now. The S&P has done much better than I would have guessed, but it's only 25. That's a lot less than 65.
And I guess the strategy is quite important here as well, which is you're saying to hold these for a long time. Try not to buy and sell.
And try and look at where the cycle has been. And I can tell you, and you can see it for yourself, there has been an enormous cycle in favor of the S&P, in favor of the American market over the rest of the world. And do you think America is going to keep on gaining on the rest of the world? And of course you're going to say yes now, because that's the flavor of this market. We think that what is good today will continue being good indefinitely, even though history tells you that is absolutely not the case. We live in a world that tends to rotate from one to the other. We believe in a world that extrapolates today's conditions, and you can easily prove that. The stock market is not efficient. The stock market extrapolates today's conditions. If they are terrible in 1982, they will take crushed earnings and multiply it by 7 times earnings. And then in 2000, peak profit margins times, 35 times earnings. They double count it in the worst way. When times are good, you multiply it by a lot. That's another way of saying you extrapolate it into the distant future.
You assume it's going to continue.
And Keynes, of course, my hero, says, of course, that's extrapolation is the convention you adopt, even though you know from personal experience that the world is not that way.
You didn't use the word crypto when you were talking about investment strategies. How much crypto do you own?
None.
Have you ever owned any crypto?